Hello friends, welcome to kodEdge. In the previous video, we saw the high-level overview of the system that we are going to build here. In this video, we will develop a multi-module project. Let's start understanding the application that we are going to build. We will create a simple exchange rate service. User will call this service to get the latest exchange rate of a particular currency. For example, here USD. Now the exchange rate service will call the external service to fetch the latest exchange rate. Once it receives the response from the external service, it will process the data and it will return the requested currency exchange rate. So you can see in the response, it will have available conversion rates in the map. Now let's break down the modules in our project. We will be developing a Springboot project using Gradle as a build system. The first module will be the domain module. The domain module will contain all business logic and all other modules will be dependent on this domain module. So next module will be REST module. This module will expose the public APIs. It will handle all user requests. So build.gradle file of the REST module will include dependency on the domain module, as it will rely on the domain module to fetch exchange rates. Next module will be the port module. This module will interact with the external services to fetch the exchange rate data, convert response into the appropriate format for the domain module, and pass it to the domain module. Hence, the port module's build.gradle file will have dependency on the domain module. Next module will be the app module. This module will initialize all the dependencies and bindings in our application. And this module is dependent on all the modules. So its build.gradle will include dependency on all the other modules. Finally, we will have a smoke test module. This module will contain functional, or you can also say end-to-end test for the application. As you can see, all our modules are dependent on the central module, that is domain module, as it contains the core business logic. All other modules serve as a supporting component. So let's say in future, if we want to add a new module, such as a repository module for the database operation, then this module will also dependent on the domain module. So domain module in turns will not depend on any other module. This follows the hexagonal architecture pattern for the microservices. Once the application is fully developed, we will dockerize it by adding the Docker file and necessary Kubernetes manifest configuration, which we will manage using the Helm chart. So let's create a new project. I am using Spring Initializer to create the project template. So build system I am using as a Gradle. This is the latest Spring Boot version while recording this video, and JDK version I am using as a 21. Let me give the group name. So I am giving name as a com.kodEdge. Artifact name or the project name I am giving as a exchange rate. And let's add the dependency. So first dependency will be for the web. Next dependency I am adding for the actuator, using which you can get the endpoints to monitor your application. So let me generate this project and let me open this project into the IntelliJ. So in this project, we are going to add multiple modules. So let's add the modules. For that, what you can do, right click on new and select the module option. And here just add the name for the module. So let's add the new module, that will be the port. Build system will be the Gradle. And let's use the JDK version 21. And let me create the module. Let's add the other modules. So next module will be the domain module. Let's add the other modules. So it will be the REST module. Let's add one more module. That will be the app module. And the last module will be the smoke test. Okay, so these are all our modules that I explained in the slide, correct? Now what we will do, we will change the code in the build.gradle file. So let's open all the modules and remove all the code from the build.gradle file. open the build.gradle file, and we will change the structure of this build.gradle file. So let's remove this version. Then next will be the repository, it will be the same. Next we will add the bootjar enable property so that we can create the jar. Now let's add one more property here, that will be the sub project. And in this sub project we will move these dependencies. Next we will add some plugins. So it will be Java plugin. Next plugin will be for the Springboot, and last plugin will be for the dependency management. Next, let's add the repositories section here. Okay, let's move this task into this sub project for running the unit test. Now let's add few dependencies. This will be for the Springboot. These two dependency we are going to move, and this dependency we will add into the app module. I will explain that later, but let's comment these two dependencies now. Let's add few more dependencies for the test, and let's keep this web dependency as well. So what is the purpose of these dependencies? All these dependencies will get used by all the modules, and within each module we will add particular dependencies that is related to that particular module. Let's remove this and let's move into the app module. Okay, so what we will do, we will remove this code. Just delete this code from here. And let's open the build.gradle file of the app module, and let's add dependency here. So I'm adding starter web and the actual dependency. Next we will add a dependency for the all the modules. So it will be like this, and here we will add the dependency of the module. So let's add the name of the module, that will be domain. Okay, like this we will add the dependency for the other modules. So what is the purpose of this app module? It is going to inject the dependencies for the all the modules, or you can say all the configuration required for this project we will do in this app module. Let's add few more tasks here. So this is for the JUnit, and this is for the creating the jar file, and jar name will be exchange rates. Now let's add a package here in the app module. Package will be com.kodEdge.app, and let's move this class into the app module. Okay, let's delete this package from here. Okay, so we are not going to use this src folder. Now let's refactor our exchange rates application class. Okay, so it is giving some error. So let's add one property here in this annotation, that will be scan base packages, and let's add the package name, that will be com.kodEdge. So what this will do, this will inject the dependencies for the classes which are in the com.kodEdge package. Now let me reload the Gradle. Okay, you can see all the dependencies are resolved. Now let's go into the parent build.gradle file, and we can see if there is any error. Okay, so there is no error in the build.gradle file as well. Okay, so let me close all the files. Now next what we will do, we will create the classes in the domain module. So let's create the new package, com.kodEdge.domain, and let's add the new model class, that will be exchange rate. Now here we are going to call the external service, right? And when we receive the response, we want to convert that response automatically into this exchange rate object. So for that purpose, we are going to add few more dependency. So let's open the build.gradle file, and let's add the dependency for the Jackson. Let's reload the Gradle. And let's go back into the extended, and let me copy paste the object class. Okay, so what we have added here, we will have a base currency, we will have rates, and we will have last updated date for that particular currency. Then I have added the constructor. Then these are all the getter and setter, and this is the toString method for this object. Now next we will create one more package, that will be the client package. And here we will add the interface for the client. So let me give the name for the interface, that will be extended client, and this will talk to the external service. So it will return the extended object, and method name will be get latest rate, and it will accept the currency which we want to convert. And for this we will add the implementation into the port module, but we are adding the abstraction in the domain module so that it should not directly dependent on the port module. Now let's add the service to call this latest exchange rate. So let me create a new class here. Class name will be exchange rate service. Now let's add the annotation for the service class, that will be service. And let's auto add the object for the exchange rate client. Let's add the annotation, that will be auto add. And let's add the method exchange rate get exchange rate. And let's change the parameter name, that will be the base currency. And what it will call? It will call this get latest exchange rate. Correct? So this is our service call. So it will return this exchange rate object. And if you go back into the exchange rate class, I have added one property here, that is JSON properties, right? So what it will do, when we will receive the response from the external service, that Jackson, it will automatically map the JSON response based on this JSON properties name. Okay, so this base rates last updated, so this key will be in the response from the external service. Okay, so our domain module is ready. Now next what we will do, we will develop our port module from which we will call the external service. So for that, let's create the external service. So we are not going to develop a new service. We are going to use some mock website. So let me open the browser. And for this purpose, what we are going to use? We are going to use this designer.mocky.io website. So here you can define your mock API, and it will generate a URL from which you can call the API. We will going to create API which will return the status as OK. Response content type will be the application/JSON. And let's add the response sample response body. So this will be the sample response body. So base currency is USD, and these are all the available rates for conversion of this currency. Like if you want to convert the USD to the AED, so conversion rate will be the 3.623, and this will be the last updated date. And now if you see these keys, base, rates, and last updated, these keys are going to map with this JSON properties keys, and this response will automatically get converted into the exchange rates object. So let's create this API first. So we are not going to use any security token or a modifier. Let's generate this HTTP response. Okay, so this is our mock URL. So let's go back into the project, and let's create the new package in the port module. Package name I am giving as a com.kodEdge.port. So let's add some configuration class. So class name will be app_config. So this class we will use to create the bin for the REST template. So let me copy code for that. Okay, so this is the configuration. So what we are doing here, we have created the app config, we have annotated this class with the add configuration annotation, and we are creating the two beans here. So first bean we are creating for the REST template, and second bean we are creating for the object mapper. So using this REST template, we will call the external service, and this object mapper we are going to use to convert our JSON response into the exchange object. Now let's add our API URL in the application.properties file. So let's create a new file here, and I'm giving name as a exchange-mock.url, and let's copy paste that URL from the website. So this is a mock URL, and let's invoke this property into the class. For that purpose, we'll create the new class. So class name will be exchange.properties class, and this will be the code for the exchange.properties. So what we are doing here, we have added the variable that is string URL, and here we have annotated this class with the add component annotation. Next, we are adding the configuration property with prefix as a exchange-mock. So this is the same prefix that we have added here, that is exchange-mock. And next, here it will automatically get a map to this URL property from this .url properties. So what, as a summary, what this class will do, this will read this application.property file, and it will give this URL using this URL variable. Now next we will implement the interface that we have created into the domain module. So we have added this interface right in the client module, that is extended client. Now we will add the implementation for this, and we will call the external service. So let's create a new class here. Class name will be exchange.client IMPL, and code for this will be this. Okay. So it is giving some error, right? So let's go to the build.gradle file, and let's add the dependency. So dependencies I am adding for the Spring Web, then Jackson. This is for the conversion of JSON into the exchange object. And next dependency I am adding for the domain model, because we are using the exchange client and the exchange object from the domain model. That's why. And here I am adding the property bootjar enable equal to false, because I don't want to create the jar file for this particular module. Let's reload the Gradle, and let's go back into the implementation class. So let's understand this class. So what I'm doing here, I just implemented this extended client interface that we have defined in the domain module, and it has a method get latest rate, correct? Next, we are auto wiring this object, that is a REST template and the object mapper, and which we will get this object from this app config class. Next, we are doing the auto wiring using the constructor injection. Next, we are also using the extended properties that we have created here. Now here we are implementing the get latest rate method, and here what we are doing, we are getting the URL from this extended properties.get URL method. Next, we are using the REST template dot get for object, to which we are passing the URL. So what will be the URL? URL will be this one. Okay, and this is coming from the extended-mock, and where we define this mock, we have defined this mock in the application.properties file, and this will return the JSON response. Next, we want to convert this JSON response into the extended object. For that purpose, we are using the object mapper, to which we are passing the JSON response, which will convert that JSON response into the extended.class. Correct? And we are not handling the exception properly here. We are just returning the null in case there is any issue. So our port module is ready. Now next what we will do, we will add one sample unit test in the domain module. So let's go into the test, and let's create a package. Package will be com.kodEdge.domain, and we will add unit test for this service class. So let me change this method name, that will be get latest rate. So let me create a test. Test name will be extended service test. So this is required to mock the some method calls. So let me add the code for this. Let me rename this class to exchange service. So first I am mocking the exchange client, that is this interface. So in the service class, what we are doing? We are creating the exchange client object. Then we are calling the get latest rate. So to mock this call, we are using the @mock annotation. Then I am using the next annotation, that is @inject_mocks. This will create the object for the exchange service. And using this object, we are going to call this get exchange method, right? And we are going to test this method. So our first test is should return the exchange rate. So this is happy path test. So here I have commented this thread.slip to demonstrate the SonarQube issue later in the CI/CD pipeline setup. So here what we are doing, we are arranging the mocks. So when we call this exchange client.get latest method, it should return this exchange object. And from where we are getting this exchange object, so I just define that dummy object in the same class. Okay. Now here we are actually testing this method, and we are just asserting this response with the actual response. So this is our expected response, okay, that we have defined here, and we are just asserting that response with the actual response that we are getting from this method. Okay, so this is very simple unit test. I have just added for the demonstration purpose while we are going to run the unit test from the CI/CD pipeline. So let's run this unit test. Okay, you can see it is successful. Okay, so our domain module is also ready and our port module is also ready. Now next what we will do, we will add the controller to call this service method that we have defined here. So let's go into the REST module and let's open the build.gradle file. Okay, so I'm adding dependency for the Spring Web, and here second dependency will be on the domain module. And here as well, I'm making the boot jar as a false because I don't want to create the jar file for this REST module. Let's reload the Gradle and let's create the new package. That will be com.kodEdge.rest. And here we will create the controller. Name will be extended controller. And this will be the code for that. So what I'm doing here, I'm annotating this class with the @rest controller annotation. Then I'm creating the object for the extended service using the constructor injection. Next, I'm creating the API, which will be the get mapping API, and I'm adding path like -latest, to which I'm going to pass the currency, and I'm accessing this currency using the path variable. So for that purpose, I'm using the annotation @path variable, and I'm accepting that string in the currency variable. Then I'm calling the get extended service, to which I'm passing the base currency, which will call the get latest rate. And this is a client, and this method call will go to the port module, right, in which we have defined the external service call. Okay, so our controller is also ready. Now next we will add the smoke test, that is end-to-end test for our application. So let's go into the smoke test module, open the build.gradle file, and let's add the dependencies. So here dependencies will be for the all the modules like app, domain, and port, and this is a dependency for the Mockito. Let's reload the Gradle. I think there is some issue with this module. Let me delete this module and recreate this module. Let's create that module again. Smoke-test, and let's create the module. Okay, so smoke test module is created. Now you can see it has added the source folder, and let's add the package into the test folder. Package name will be com.kodEdge.smoke. Before adding the class here, let's add a dependency in the build.gradle files. Let's add the new class for the test. Class name will be extended controller smoke test. and let me add the code for that. So let's understand what I'm doing here. I'm just using the Springboot test annotation here, in which I'm defining the environment, for which I'm using the random port. So what this will do, this is going to run the Tomcat, okay, and it is going to deploy our application on the local Tomcat, for which it is going to use the random port to call our controller API. Next, I'm defining the active profile, that will be the test. Then here I'm auto wiring the test template, that is a test REST template. Here I'm defining the extended client object, which we are going to mock. Then this is a happy path test, should return the status code as a 200 for the response for the application health API. So what I'm expecting here, I'm expecting the 200 response for the application, that is a health endpoint, and this health endpoint is provided by the actuator. So what I'm doing here, REST template.get for entity, to which I'm passing the URL /actuator/health. I'm just asserting the response, that is http status.ok. Next test is for the getting the latest exchange rate for the currency. So what I want to do, I want to convert this base currency, and I'm just mocking the get latest rate API. Okay, so it will return the this response. Then what I'm doing here, I'm calling the our API, that is latest /currency, that we have defined in the controller. So in the test we are calling this API. We are not calling method directly, because this is the end-to-end test. And here what we are getting, it will return the response. We are converting that response into the extended object, and we are just asserting that response. Okay, so this is our end-to-end test. Let's run this test. You can see both the tests are getting passed. Now if you see the console output of this test, it has started the Tomcat server. Okay, so our end-to-end test is also completed. Now next what we will do, we will add one task in the build.gradle file to run this test from the pipeline. So we are considering this test as a smoke test. So let's go to the parent build.gradle file, and let's add the task. So that will be outside this sub project. So I'm adding task as a run smoke test. So I'm adding group as a verification, and this is a description, that is run all tests from the smoke test module, and this depends on this smoke test module. Now if you want to run the smoke test directly from the command prompt, what you can do, you can run the command like this /gradle w, and this will be your task name. So this will run your smoke test. Okay, so you can see it ran the smoke test from the smoke module. Now next what we will do, we will add the Docker file in our project, and we will try to run our project from the Docker. So let's create a new file in the parent directory. File name will be Docker file. Okay, so what I'm doing, I'm using the base image as a OpenJDK 21. Then this will be our working directory, and I am copying the extended jar file, which is going to generate in the libs folder, and I am copying that jar file into this app directory. Then I am exposing our application using 8080 port, and this is our jar name, that will be extended.jar, and this is a command to execute our jar. So let me try to build our jar. So for that purpose, what you can do, just run the command /gradle w clean build. So it will run the unit test, and if you go into the app folder or app module, it has created the build folder. In the build folder in the libs, you can see it has created the extended.jar, from which we are copying this jar into this app working directory. Okay, so let's go into the command prompt and cd into the extended directory and run the command docker build -t exchange rates dot. So this will create the Docker image. Okay, so Docker image is created. So if you run the command Docker images, you can see extended images created. Now to run the project, what you can do, Docker run -p your port, that will be 8080, and the image name, that is extendeds. Okay, so you can see our Tomcat is started. Now let's go back into the browser. So first we will check the health of our application. So URL will be localhost :8080 /actuator/health. So you can see we are getting status as up. Now let's call our API. That will be /latest/currency. That will be USD. Okay, so you can see we are getting the response from this external service. Correct? So this is the response that we have configured in the external service. Okay, so this is the same response we are getting from our application. Now what we will do, we'll push our code into the GitHub repository. So let's go into the GitHub and let's create the new repository here. Repository name will be extendeds. So I'm making this repository as a private for now, and let's create the repository. Okay, so our extended repository is created. Just follow this instruction to push our code into the GitHub repository. So let me open the terminal and just follow these commands. So first command is git init. Next command is to add all the files from our local repository. So I am just doing git add dot. Okay, so it has added all the files into the commit. Let's add the message for the commit. Give message as a first commit. Let me make this m as a small m. Okay, so it has added all these files. The next command is git branch -m main. And let's add the remote branch. And let's push our code. So I already configured the username and password in my local configuration. That's why it is not asking the username and the password. So if you refresh this GitHub repository now, you can see code is pushed into the GitHub. So that's it for this lecture. In the next video, we will see how to set up the Jenkins and the SonarQube. Thanks for watching the video.